Gotta just do my security settings.
Try to ward it off, but you know.
Have you been down there?
Actually, I'll leave
Not recently. Yeah, my kids are there now, so. Yeah, why? There's a been.
We have a winter tenant.
Oh,
I have been,
so where are you in Rockport now? You used to be on
well, actually, we're at the end of them.
Long Beach, that's where I thought you were.
Physically, it's Gloucester.
Ah.
Okay, hello, everybody. Thank you for attending today's Land Use Summit Light, where we're going to have a presentation by Horsley Witten of the next steps of the Climate Resilient Carlisle grant-funded MVP project. So seeing a quorum of the MVP Core Committee, and as chair of the MVP Core Committee, I will call the MVP Core Committee to order. And I welcome any other boards and committees who have a quorum here to do the same.
1, 2, 3.
We didn't post it though.
We didn't post it either.
No, we won't deliver.
Housing Trust. We have 3 members here.
Okay.
Wait, wasn't it posted on the?
No, I posted the MVP Core Committee, and then I suggested the other boards and committees post if you thought you'd have a quorum. All right, so I will let you figure out what you want to do about that. And in the meantime, I will turn this over to Ellie Baker and Gabriella Spitzer. They're here from Horsley Witten Group, and they're going to share a presentation on next steps for this project.
And so you don't have a quorum, we need 4.
Thank you.
Quorum.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay in the room and online?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everybody. My name is Ellie Baker. As Julie said, I'm with Horsley Witten Group. I've seen some familiar faces here. I think there's some new folks too that I haven't met yet. I'm gonna share my screen here, and I just have a brief presentation to go through today. Let's see if I can do this properly. I think it worked.
Yeah.
You seeing the screen? Great. So today we're calling this a sort of kickoff to our deep dives. And so I guess I just want to make sure, that everybody's comfortable. We are recording this. The purpose of this is to give all of the different boards and commissions in town sort of an idea of what is coming and what our information requests and interactions hopefully will be over the coming month or two in particular. So as I said, I'm Ellie Baker. I'm an environmental planner with the Horsley Witten Group. I do have my colleague here, Gabriella Spitzer, who is also an environmental planner with the Horsley Witten Group. And we have been working with Julie and a core team to kind of go through the climate resilience project. And I want to give you today just a little bit of background for anybody who isn't totally familiar with that process. I know many of you are. But because this is being recorded, we wanted to give everybody kind of some context here. And then we also want to lay out a plan for how we're hoping to get some really solid interaction and feedback from the different boards and commissions and others that might be interested in this process as we move forward. So today's agenda, as I said, is just to give an overview of the Climate Resilient Carlisle project and process that we're going through. Talk about some what we're calling deep dive meetings that we'd like to do to dig into some of the real details of recommendations and what it means to make resilient Carlisle changes to your codes, and some logistics on those meetings so that folks can have this meeting and the PowerPoint that we present as sort of a reference laying out what's coming in the next steps. So quick meeting today. This is more of an informational meeting. And we're hoping to learn, from here on out, we're really hoping to learn a lot more about the work that all of you and your boards and committees are doing, and how you are using your different rules and regulations, different codes, and how we might make improvements to those that work for you, that meet your needs. So just a little bit of background on the MVP process for anyone who hasn't been too tuned into this of late. So this is some basic information. Probably many of you are familiar with it, but we just wanted to make sure everyone's sort of on the same page here. So the MVP, or Municipal Vulnerability Program in Massachusetts, is a program to help communities organize their plans and ideas for climate resilience. So it works sort of hand in hand with FEMA's hazard mitigation plan, which you all have, which is designed to help communities reduce their risks of hazards. So several years ago, Carlisle went through a process with the MVP program to kind of do a rapid assessment of your different resilience vulnerabilities and identify some action items. So out of that, you generated lots of goals and actions and ideas that came from that. So some of those priorities included things such as protecting water resources, supporting farms in town and agriculture, promoting energy efficiency, protecting some of your critical infrastructure, increasing resilience to power outages. We hear a lot about downed trees and power outage concerns, and what can you do about that? There's also issues with drainage. So understanding your drainage issues, how that interacts with infrastructure, flooding concerns, and how you might address them, forest management. So these are just a number of the sort of goals and actions that came out of that MVP process. So again, that was a couple of years ago. And then the next question that comes out of that is, okay, you have these great ideas and goals, but how do you actually move forward with them? So one way to move forward with them is that Carlisle received a grant from the Massachusetts MVP program again to take the next step, to kind of go from, okay, here's some nice ideas, to here's what we're going to do about it. Here's some changes we can make in the code to actually make those improvements. So that's where we are now. So this process, Climate Resilient Carlisle, has been outlined sort of under the guidance of a lot of work from Julie and the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness sort of core team that's been working with her. But Climate Resilience Carlisle is an implementation project to make sure that Carlisle's rules, regulations, and bylaws reflect the important policy goals that were identified. So local laws and regulations get written and rewritten or adjusted over time, right? For example, electric vehicles are new and there aren't enough charging stations. So maybe a community wants to add, the certain percentage of new parking spots have charging stations that must be attached to them. Sometimes there are competing goals. So for example, maybe there was a community that valued its street trees and had nice, really tall trees, and then there was an ice storm and lots of trees lost limbs, people lost power, there were houses that got damaged. So the community established a policy that all new trees would be smaller varieties, no more than 20 feet tall when fully mature. So these are just ideas. But in setting those goals, they also have a goal for larger tree canopy to cool the community. And you can see that as you sort of think through these examples of changes that different municipalities could make, you can see that some of these goals that you identify may be competing, or they may require adjustments in different parts of your code. And so what we want to do with all of the boards and committees and with your help is to kind of think through these goals, sort of get them into alignment, bring you some suggestions and get your feedback on those suggestions, and help us help you to make decisions that sort of prioritize the changes you want to make and sort of align them. The goal of this project, as I said, is to work together to review Carlisle's rules, regulations, and bylaws to make sure that they're aligned with the climate goals that you've already set. And where there need to be additional sort of tweaks or adjustments, like adjusting your development standards in the example I just gave, we'll make those suggestions. So that's what we are doing. That's what our Horsley Witten team is doing with Julie and the MVP core team, is to come up with these suggestions, bring them to you, and sort of expose any of these competing policy goals and talk through them with all of you so that we can get feedback. So just to give you an idea, I know a lot of you work with these different codes and policies and are familiar with some of them. But here is sort of a listing of the many codes and policies that guide development and just guide the functioning of Carlisle as a community. You might be super familiar with some of these from your work on a given board or commission, or your own personal experience with a project or a certain issue in town. but there may be others that you're not familiar with at all. And so that's part of what we're trying to address in this work, is that we want to bring people together to look at codes sort of across the board. You may be familiar with some and not familiar with others, and it's really helpful to think about things sort of across the whole umbrella of codes across town. So we're going to be going into more depth with each of these codes, and we're calling these sort of our deep dive meetings. And that's really what we're trying to get at here, is to present and introduce this idea of these deep dive meetings that we want to have with each of your boards and commissions. Before I go further, I just also want to highlight, in particular, the planning board is sort of the host of a lot of different important development guiding rules and regulations. And I want to call some special attention to that. These are some special regulations that, guide the permits for development in town. And these include the regulations that I've listed here, which describe the permit processes and requirements for various types of development projects. In addition, you're probably familiar with this, but if you've been working with this in any way, but the additional design standards for a number of regulations are documented in one single document, which is referenced as Attachment A. This attachment, the regulations that have this Attachment A are denoted with this asterisk on this slide, so you can see what I'm talking about. But we anticipate that a lot or possibly much of what we talk about is going to impact or require some sort of adjustments in Attachment A. These are design standards that apply, as you can see here, to subdivisions, common driveways, conservation clusters, and open space community development projects. So we anticipate that these will be an important element in what we're, what edits or revisions we recommend, and some of the discussions that we have. And then the changes made in Attachment A, if we do go down that route, would also have some ripple effects that would need to, require changes elsewhere, or just sort of review elsewhere for consistency. So I just wanted to make sort of special attention to that. So I just want to kind of walk you through an example of what we're talking about here. The kinds of questions that we're asking. We can say that we're experiencing, for example, more intense rainfall more frequently. Carlisle's flood maps from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, are 10 years old. But not only that, they're based on data that was gathered even earlier than that. And that data reflects the conditions of the past. I don't think I'm telling anybody something they don't know. This is, kind of an issue with some of the FEMA maps. But a lot of the regulations in Carlisle, like in any community in Massachusetts or elsewhere, use the FEMA maps as a reference point. So FEMA flood maps do not account for anticipated climate projections or changes that we might anticipate in terms of rainfall, flood elevations, et cetera, or even some of the changes that we're already experiencing. So one suggestion that we might look to consider, for example, might be adding an additional buffer to the FEMA floodplain to make it a little bit larger than what is shown on the maps. Or another option may be to formalize a process in which the floodplain boundary could be expanded based on observations of flooding. There is some element of this already in the Wetlands Protection Act and regulations. If you wanted to go ahead and make such adjustments, let's consider what regulations such a change would impact. Where in your code would you actually need to go and make that change? So this slide shows just some of the regulations that reference the floodplain or relate to stormwater management, which is also a vital element of determining a floodplain. So you might have to look at regulations that address flood hazard districts, septic systems, the Board of Health regulations, subdivision rules and regulations that have elements of stormwater management in them, open space or wetlands protection. So this just gives you an idea that some of the changes that may be identified or recommendations that may be suggested for improving the resilience in town have sort of a ripple effect and require us to look through various rules and regulations for consistency. So with that, I just wanted to kind of turn now to a little bit of the logistics of this project. And we started this project with Julie basically back in January. And the first stage has been to gain information and learn more about your priorities and goals in Carlisle, as well as start to review. We've reviewed quite a lot of your ordinances, I should say bylaws, regulations, programs, policies. We've had a public meeting, the public forum that we had back in February. And we've been gathering a lot of information about how things work and what some of the concerns on the ground actually are in Carlisle. So now it's really time to turn to consulting with staff and boards. So we are looking to have meetings with all of you over the next few months to really kind of consult with you on how things really work. What are your concerns? How do you actually use your codes on your board? And where do you see the opportunities to go, one step further or two steps further in terms of improving your resilience? So we will be bringing you recommendations to these meetings, but we also, and we will be providing them ahead of time so you can take some time to look at them. But we would really like to have sort of working discussions with all of you. These will not be, formal meetings, informational meetings such as this one. This will be much more of a discussion to really understand what might work and understand if there are reasons that some of our recommendations wouldn't work. So just to kind of close out this schedule here, you'll see that we're going to be bringing some draft recommendations. And then we will consult again, continue to consult basically with the boards and commissions over the coming year. There will be another public forum in early next year, and then a final report next summer. So these deep dive meetings that I've talked about, we have scheduled these. So thank you all for your coordination and help in scheduling these. We are basically trying to kick off these discussions with all of you in a way that is open to the public. We certainly want folks to come if they're interested. It's also open to sort of cross-pollination from other boards and commissions to join any of these meetings. But we will be focusing on different issues at different meetings so that we can focus on the issues pertaining to specific boards at specific meetings. Otherwise, it's a little bit overwhelming to try to cover everything all together. So some of the discussion will be, wanted to give you a sense of sort of how we're going to run these discussions and what it might cover and what you can bring to the table. Some of the discussions will be more general about sort of how the rubber meets the road for you and your work. Are you seeing challenges with conflicting values or conflicting policies? Do you see one board doing one thing and then you're trying to do something a little bit differently, or you have a certain resilience goal and you're not seeing that same goal coming out of other boards and commissions? We'd like to hear about that. But most of the conversation is really going to be pretty specific. We're really hoping to bring to you the preliminary recommendations that we're coming up with and get your real feedback on those. So as I said, you will be able to access those ahead of time so that you can do some thinking. But these will be kind of working sessions. So the logistics, we've planned 4 meetings right now. So resilience is obviously an interdisciplinary topic, right? It touches almost everything that we do. And as we mentioned, it can result in competing policies. So part of our goal in having these conversations is to make sure that you're all learning from each other. So I don't know how often the different boards and commissions in town have a chance to kind of go to another meeting or see how the other boards are approaching things, but this is a chance for you all to do some of that sort of sharing. With that in mind, everyone is invited to all the meetings that we've listed here. Though, as I said, they'll each be aimed at a different group or set of groups. One thing that we talked about is the possibility of each board or commission identifying a liaison, if, you know, might not make sense for everybody to go to a different board meeting, right? That's kind of overwhelming, but if you have someone who's particularly interested from Board of Health who wants to go to another meeting, you could have a liaison that would go to one of those meetings and report back or report in with ideas. So that would be helpful. This is a lot of meetings. It's a lot of time. You all are busy and we understand that. So, you know, if there's something that you wanted to talk through separately, you can certainly reach out to us as well. And you'll see at the end of this presentation, we have our contact information. But we would love to do some of this information sharing at these meetings. So to get to the details here, Monday, May 6th, we have a hybrid meeting, which means it will be in town hall, but also online with the local emergency planning committee. So this is at 10 o'clock for approximately an hour. And you can get the information. I'll go back in a minute, but Julie has also created some signage, which I'm sure you will be seeing around town that has links to access each of these meetings. There will be a meeting Thursday, May 9th at 6:30, which will be a big one. This is with the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Board of Health, and the Zoning Board. So this is, I think, going to be a busy one. But we encourage folks to sort of cross-pollinate here and come to meetings and understand what the other ones are considering. On Wednesday, May 15th at 7 o'clock, we'll have a Zoom meeting with the Historical Commission and the Housing Trust. And then on Thursday, May 16th, the next day, at 7 o'clock, we'll have a meeting with the Environmental Sustainability Committee. So the Environmental Sustainability Committee has been contributing to this MVP process well before Horsley Witten, the consultant, was involved in this. So that may be, you know, an interesting one for folks to come to and kind of hear a little bit about what was at, you know, what's kind of been raised at some of the other meetings leading up to that. So as it says here, let's break silos. I don't want to say that there are silos specifically in Carlisle and the way that the different boards and commissions work, but they kind of exist everywhere and we're all very busy. So to the extent that you can, you know, share information and share your time with a different board or commission, that would be fabulous. So with that, I would like to open this up to questions, and I also just want to leave our contact information here. Your town staff, as you know, are Julie Mercier and Sarah Wasserman. And Julie and Sarah can be reached. You can find them at Town Hall, but email them, reach out. But also feel free to reach out to our team at Horsley Witten, Gabriella and me. We'd be happy to talk through any ideas you have or thoughts, concerns, or just logistics questions. So I will open it up for any questions and stop sharing my screen in a moment here. And really look forward to everybody's participation and meeting you and hearing all your ideas or complaints about this you know, project as we move forward. So thank you all very much.
All right, so if you have questions, you can raise your hand in Zoom or just raise your hand like this and I'll try to find you. Is anybody? Kate?
Well, it's a standard question. Are we going to be getting a copy of these slides? Because rather than badly taking notes about the.
Yes, I always get a
Yes.
copy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
John
gonna just-
Bauer.
Oh, I'm going to share my screen one more time just to show that meeting announcement that Julie has, so you can keep a lookout for it. But while I do that, go ahead, John.
Okay, my question is, I teach energy and climate stuff, so I'm very familiar with all the IPCC scenarios and the ranges of them. And so I guess the big question as you look at ranges and impact, it can vary quite a lot. And you can be very conservative and therefore, in other words, huge impact over the next 20, 30 years. And therefore you can say, you know, there'll be floods everywhere and all these other things, or you can be just the opposite. So I guess how do you deal with the ranges knowing there's all this incredible uncertainty. And, you know, I know we can't get rid of the uncertainty till we're there, but, so.
Right. No, that's a good question. And for the work that we're doing, we're really relying on what the state of Massachusetts is developing. And the state, you know, that's sort of our primary go-to for information for planning purposes. I mean, all of this is for planning purposes. And the state has a resilience hub, they've basically called it, where they have, you know, in the state, you're probably familiar, John, but the state has done a hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan where they've kind of identified, based on watersheds, the different sort of climate projections that they're expecting, and they're continually adding to that. But for us, for planning purposes, that's really what we're using as our sort of basic reference. Understanding that there is a lot of uncertainty, but for planning and for sort of public education and public information, it's helpful to kind of guide people in one general direction. So that's kind of what we're using for our reference.
Well, okay. Yeah, right. You can all get it when the disasters of flooded roads and Back Bay disappearing and all these things. We'll deal. Those are sort of the extreme scenarios. Easily happened, right? We know that.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of this, John, and I think this is a theme that we've been hearing already through this process, and also I expect we'll hear more about it, but there are some things that, you know, issues that are already occurring in town with regard to, you know, trees or swale management or stormwater management, et cetera, that regardless of, you know, what you think may be happening in the future, or the uncertainty of that, there are things that can certainly be improved now about maintenance or design or new development or redevelopment, et cetera, that can help to alleviate some of the issues moving forward. And that in and of itself is part of, you know, sort of resilience of the community as a whole. And we heard some of that at the public meeting that we held also. So I think that's a really, you know, a valid approach to some of this as well.
Does anyone in person have any questions? Sylvia?
I had a question. I'm sort of stepping outside my usual silo, talking about silos. I'm looking at all the different boards that are mentioned here, written a number of them down. But there's a land use group that hasn't been mentioned, and that's the Recreation Commission. And I didn't know if they'd ever been considered. They do have fields that they like to use. I know that some of the fields have a problem with being unavailable at times because they're out of soggy. And as the town grows, who knows, they might need more land. But I just a thought that, you know, they might be interested in participating a little bit with this.
Yeah, I
I'm happy-
appreciate you raising that. Oh, sorry, Julie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm happy to make a connection with them and loop them into this.
Yeah.
It's not too late. Go ahead, Ellie.
No, I was going to say the same thing. That's great.
We put them with this housing trust and historic. Available.
Outside my silo.
So this presentation is being recorded so that we can sort of share it around and just make sure that folks know about this process. You'll also see these posters around. I don't know exactly where Julie is posting them, but they will have links. Eventually, you'll be able to get a link to each of these meetings or come in person. So there will be more information coming. And really the purpose of this meeting today is just to make sure everybody is aware and super excited about participating in it.
So I'll just quickly talk about the poster. So it's currently out being translated into 3 other languages. And then you'll see it posted around town buildings, at ferns, at some various like local gathering places, and then also on the MVP website, which sits on the planning board page of the town website. So, and then individual links for the meetings, like we don't have enough space on this one poster to put them all, but you can find those on the town website. So on the town calendar or under each individual board and committee, you'll be able to find the Zoom links. So
Are you gonna blow this up for the for the route to sustainability?
thank you for the reminder. Yes, I am blowing this up for the Route to Sustainability Day as well. So you'll see it there if you come. It's on April 27th. Does anybody else have?
I'm sorry, I started to go back in. I assume at some point you framed this, and you probably did this in another meeting, in the broader context. I'm just thinking around transportation and water flows and everything else and infrastructure. That clearly impacts, as we know, Storrow Drive gets flooded, all these other things get flooded, as do plenty of RTs. And so the question from a broader infrastructure standpoint and transportation, it's very much tied to this, which affects us, you know. And so I mean, you're dealing with it in each individual community, but there's a broader context. I'm just focusing on transportation, and, you know, there's going to be huge impacts in transportation over the next 10, 15 years if some of these scenarios, you know, unfold. That costs money, as we know. So do you talk about that and sort of frame it in this broader context, and rather than each individual community?
Well, yes, in general, John, this project is really focused on Carlisle, focused on the codes and how the codes can be adjusted and improved to improve the resiliency of Carlisle specifically. So your point is totally valid about Carlisle as part of a greater, you know, setting, and there's, you're intertwined with Greater Boston, you know, no doubt about it. I think some of that is a little bit beyond our scope of work for this specific project, but there have been, and I don't know, Julie, if you want to talk about it at all, but there have been a number of sort of processes, like the whole MVP process leading up to this, which was a couple of years ago, certainly, I'm sure, touched on, I mean, I know it touched on transportation. I'm sure it talked about transportation on sort of the regional basis. This is like one action that came out of that process.
Mhm.
So this project is not necessarily going to focus on such a broad setting, but your point is well taken and totally valid. I think there have been a lot of discussions in town about, you know, sort of the regional issues and how Carlisle interacts with your neighbors. So I don't know, Julie, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, so, I was gonna mention too, at the public forum in February, John, there were a lot of comments made by people regarding our local infrastructure. So the importance of maintaining our local roads, utilities, critical infrastructure, to make us more resilient as part of the bigger context that we're in. So there was a big focus on infrastructure at that meeting, and just a need to kind of put resources behind what we have currently.
Yeah.
As well as planning for the future. Does anybody else on Zoom have any other comments or questions?
I see a question in the room, I believe.
Yep, Barney?
Hi, yeah, I'm Barney Arnold on the select board. I'm just thinking about some of the, couple of the questions that are gonna be on our town meeting agenda in May. Two of which are about, using CPA funds to conduct hydrologic studies, you know, watershed studies for Greeno Pond and then, the Cranberry Bog. And so I'm just thinking we should sort of bear in mind some of the questions that you may be trying to look at, or data you're trying to collect, whether there's some way, right, we can include some of that in the study, to be helpful in this larger process of climate resilience. With the conscom behind me.
Do you have a sense of the timing of those studies, if the funding gets approved?
There's, I don't know, summer, fall.
Yeah. Remember the money available.
July 1st.
July 1, yeah.
Right, the money's available July 1st and then the study should be.
One of the things that's pretty critical, that if you done is. Right. You know, they haven't done before, we get fall and winter.
Yeah, the good news is this grant project goes until June 2025, so we have some time to get those coordinated with some of the stuff we're doing here, get them in time. Right. I think are there any other last questions, comments? All right, so I just want to remind everyone that was recorded and will be distributed so that you can share it with your board and committee members who couldn't attend today. And thank you very much for taking time out of your busy days to be here. And please start thinking about what comments you might want to give hopefully when you attend these meetings in May. Start thinking about what else we can do in town regarding climate resilience and how we can best integrate our different land use boards and committees. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you so much for
Gabrielle.
your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Makes them triple.